Hello and welcome. This is a very short class about a very historical debate between the linguist Noam Chomsky, who now is visiting all our newspapers because it's been announced that he's dead. And although he himself was not the person who explained that he's not, it was his couple. This gave us this frivolous interest. I don't mean that death is a frivolous matter, of course, in philosophy. I mean, it is an anecdote like the times when Mark Twain was allegedly dead, and he said that was an exaggeration, or when people thought that Paul McCartney was dead, and then John Lennon composed a song against him saying, "They're right, you're dead." So, 1971, in the how do you call now Holland, the Netherlands, the short country. You see this. We can begin with this. The euphemist, the new way to approach word by word to this correction is sickening. And it is something that neither Chomsky, who focuses in the syntax, nor Foucault, who, of course, in the French zone, you don't speak about language, but of discourse. So the idea that one word by itself means something, not in a context, not depending on the intention of the speaker, is an error, a philosophical error, a linguistic error, and all this movement, woke, whose name itself derives from their own files, because it was when Afro-descendant was mistreated by the police, they came with the idea of to be awake, like a Buddha, to be not sleepy. But now, if I say that word, they would immediately suppose that I'm against them, like I'm with Donald Trump. So it's crazy. It's the idea, the talent to find the insult hidden where nobody was insulting. So in German, they have now 63 categories of gender identities. Because everything you say, yeah, no, but that would be offending to this, and we have to So, that's a complete error. If I say I spent a lovely evening playing with kids that have that are, and the old word, no, Mongoloid, because that was an error geographically, but with kids that have Down syndrome, that have one extra chromosome, and they're lovely, and they have this capacity of enjoying the present, and I'm saying something nice, but the word is not nice. If I say, thank God my kids are not mentally challenged, I'm saying the correct word to say something that's offending. So, you see, if I say this wine is delicious, it's like butter, or this Argentinian red meat is like butter, it's positive. If I say they're beating us because the stupid goalkeeper has hands of butter, then butter becomes something not that great. So in order to explain this debate, I will explain a little bit who was Chomsky and who was Foucault, who is still, because he's a very vivid, living man, more than we thought. He survived his own death. It's the second Jew to resurrect, no? And at that stage, he was very interested in a universal, so this from the illustration, this idea that comes from Kant, so it has all the illusion that the positivism, the progressiveness will allow us to be better and better. So he has a little bit ancient values in comparison, because Foucault doesn't believe in progressism. He's at this stage of his life still a Marxist, but a very critical Marxist. He's not in favor of Russia. He says he has this idea of human nature, which is reproducing the bourgeoisie. So the main treasure from Chomsky for we who doesn't know him personally is he says there are very poor information, very little inputs in order to get a child gain the capacity to speak. And surprisingly, he speaks very fluently, very well, very soon, and he's capable of doing all possible sentences, and nobody taught him that. So it must be an internal, a biological disposal who helps acquire the language. Well, that was discussed very good for, I think, the great critic Georg Steiner was the best critic in his book Babel. The idea that not every language has a structure that can be abstractly considered universal. And then we have to say that the tradition in America, and also, I must say, we can say also in United Kingdom, so there is a tradition which now the postmodern would feel that it lays in the language. So if, according to arrivals theory from Chomsky's, from the linguist Humboldt, Sapir, Whorf, Alexander Humboldt was not contemporary. They were not working together. It's just that they were successively improving, refining that theory, so the theory becomes the name of the improvers. So if I find a detail that makes more accurate the relativity theories from Einstein, it would be called the relativity theory from Einstein Brouwer. They would say that the language is the father of the thought. We thought that we think words, and he says, no, the words will, the way you say something is also the way you think. So you can learn a lot of that culture from how they speak, or why the Arabs have 23 words for camel and the Eskimos has 28 words for white. So the perception we have from the universe is through the language. So what interests a culture more, you can see that in the language. And also, you're driven, you're commanded by the words itself. So if you say, do the right thing, you are already saying there is one right thing and not many possibilities. So Foucault, I could speak much more about Chomsky. What else shall I say? He worked in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was criticized because he was against Vietnam, and the MIT was providing resources and guns for Vietnam. He says he was the internal making intelligence, but later he resigned. He won't pay the taxes to the MIT. That was his rebellion. No? On one hand, he was a linguistic who postulated this, and with this, at a very young age, 20, 30, he had a great confrontation with the cognitivist psychological school, and he was an empirist, like the tradition in the UK. So, in order to make a reductio ad absurdum, which is an ampliation to the absurd, we can say, according to this linguistic theory, from the rivals of Chomsky, because Chomsky would say the opposite, would say every language on one way or another would say what he wants to say. All are the same, are instruments that allows us to express what we want, whatever we want. So he's also, of course, against Lacan and the idea of subconscious who's speaking through us, who's speaking. No, we are Kantian. We are by the Enlightenment. We were capable of taking the knowledge on our hands and to. So to make a joke, to teach this rival theory, we can say, if Descartes, who has written in English and not in French, he would be an empirist and not a rationalist. So, remember these two categories refers to following. An empirist believes that we can grasp the experience, we can measure it, we can make crucial experiments in order to know anything. Philosophy has a very long tradition of being rationalist. That starts with Plato, also Aristotle. So Plato had this. It has also to do with some kind of misogynistic, racistic, and against biologicistic position, no? Because a slave, a woman can see, can watch, and they're not capable of thinking like we are saving the culture. So the idea that the knowledge comes from the mind and not by touching, by feeling, is a very old one. Aristotle himself deduced it, that the women had less teeth than men, which was the logical inference, mistaken, but he could save that error by just looking at his wife's mouth, but he didn't do that because it wasn't necessary. He knew better. So you can see it's not that we had to wait until Galileo Galilei had the telescope, and that's why in the past we didn't, we weren't empirists. No, it was a political decision because Aristotle hadn't the telescope, but he certainly had a wife. He could look at her teeth. I cannot say it was a very lovely smile, a very clean teeth, so I can understand he didn't like to. But okay, we are talking about ontology and not odontology. So, the the figure of Chomsky has then this Kantian. He's a very good follower of Kant, so as Piaget is, who has the same interests. So he makes these combinations. Kant has spoken about the categories with which we are born. He combines the empirist and the rationalist. He says David Hume has woke. I am awaking thanks to the provocative ideas of Hume, who considered that the mind is a tabula rasa. There's nothing. There's no self. The impression comes and I see, but there is nothing in my mind. Against the theologists that say, if you can think about God, that great idea God has insufflated in your mind, because yourself, you're a mortal, you're dumb, and the idea of an infinity intelligence, you cannot conceive, no? And Hume says, well, I can conceive a Minotaur because I made a copy-paste of a cow and a man. So the posture of Chomsky is a traditional academical one, but very separate from his political opinions. So we cannot establish any connection with it, on the contrary. So that we can say he has a universal values. He has this ideal that all mankind, of course. But all we can say is he used the prestige as a linguist in order to give a voice to the oppressed who are in no condition to speak. So, but we cannot say that his expertise in linguistic make him know better about the Twin Towers or anything about his opinion is, no? So, now let's go to examine who Michel Foucault was. Michel Foucault is a very complex figure because he has not the British or English ideal of to be very clear, at least not in every book, because he also commented that Derrida had shown him that in France you are taking as shallow and as an idiot if you are too clear. You have to be a little obscure. He also was a profound admirer of Heidegger. We can see that because that's not a very mentioned fact. No? We can see in his studies of the painting Las Meninas from Velázquez that he emulates the study from Heidegger in Van Gogh's Shoes from Lensman. So he started a book saying there are two kinds of philosophers: the ones who inspired a new theory like Heidegger, and like me, the ones who want to examine the grounds where we are staying at, the condition of possibility in this historical moment. So I will try to be neutral and to describe, and this neutrality expresses in many ways, because he was reluctant to speak about himself, his person. In the debate, he's asked, why do you have a problem to speak about you? And he says, to speak about me represents no philosophical problem. So there is no problem It is we are focusing what matters. Well, then we must say that at this stage of his career, Michel Foucault has been called the archaeological times of Foucault. He pretends to be an archaeologist of the knowledge. He investigates the vocabulary of science. He discovers that the biology just recently speaks about life and has spoken about reflexes and other things. So he's trying to establish how like the historical area, the significant others are making possible some line of thought in every times, and he has shown that making history in a very Marxianian way, because he wants to establish that something is not forever, that something is cultural. So the best way to show that is to show that it wasn't like this in the past. He has the book about the story of how we conceived and how we manage madness, about sexuality. So when these two find themselves, I can say one is more like Popper. Popper believed that the science was defined with the possibility to be refuted. So he's a very honest and a very optimistic epistemologist. And Chomsky is more like Thomas Kuhn, who has said that the structure of the scientific revolutions, he may have said nature. I want to establish that that word, nature and structure, are in some ways synonyms. So I can say, what's the nature of your question? Why do you want to know? So I'm not thinking there that nature is biological. So it's important because we will find in the debate very many moments when they use the same word, but they're not referring to the same thing. The most evident of that word is power. Chomsky speaks about power in a very classic manner. The power is the police, no? And Foucault has this distributed idea of the micro, the power that every one of us are reproducing the status quo without knowing, but there are not visibilities, you cannot see so clearly and so naively the power just from the great dominant institutions. No? He always wants to show that, for instance, the university itself appears very philanthropic, but it is not. So Foucault would be then less naive. No? He's like one of the master of suspicion, as Marx, Nietzsche, and Freud was told. And he's, of course, rationalist. Another difference, well, Chomsky is a great exception, and in this aspect seems a French because he's a superstar. We have memes, we have t-shirts, we have... Chomsky is like a rock star, which is not the case usually in America for an intellectual, but it is in France. He's at this moment is when Foucault is being the new superstar in philosophy and defeating Sartre. No? So Sartre is saying that there must be a court that judges the police that were doing wrong. And Foucault said that's stupid because this idea of justice that we have now is not the one we will have in the future. So when they ended the debate, there was also a thing which is a great difference, because Foucault has as an ideal to be behind, like Nietzsche, good or wrong. He's not interested in the moral aspects, but in USA they're more than everything interested in the first question is about the morals. I was when Monica Lewinsky. I was not in the over. I didn't see anything. I was in Washington when it happened, and I say, well, it's a great administration, a very good presidency. He can do with his private life what he wants, so that's a mistake, but not as a president, as an individual. I say, no, he's a bad person. He can lie to his wife, so he will lie to us. And that thing is also very apparent in this debate. You can see that Chomsky is in shock because Foucault seems to him like a complete amoral, not immoral, but he does not no interest whatsoever in morals. And this was a negative thing, of course, for Chomsky, but it would be a great, it would be like a compliment for Foucault. We can also make a contrast between them by saying that contrast that established Max Weber between the American professor. The American professor sells you knowledge like he would sell potatoes. It's a technical. But the European one is a guide for life, charismatic. So, having said that, we can now very quickly make a resume in a nutshell what they're arguing about or discussing. But we must say they're not rivals. They're not studying the same thing. One is a linguistic and there is a philosopher. You can say, of course, always philosophers and linguistics were against each other. Let's say Heidegger says, well, only in Greek and in German you can think philosophy. The Italian is for opera. Ortega y Gasset, the Spanish influencer, the mentor for Heidegger, said Spanish is the existentialist language. Why? Because the idea of being, in Spanish you can have ser and estar. You have one verb to be for transitory things and another for permanent things. No? But a linguistic one, a person who knows about language, not about philosophy, would say this is complete bullshit, because that has to do with what Ferdinand de Saussure called the value of sign. In Spanish, they have one word for dead fish. Wordly, it would be the fish you caught it, and the other for a life. In USA, you have pork and pig. You have two names because you don't want to scare kids that they're eating a very lovely animal. So that doesn't mean that the Spanish knows better when a fish is dead or not. It's just they express it with the same word and addressing an aspect of that word, giving that word this meaning. No? Okay. So they discuss about human nature, which is a very forgettable, so not very, very, very interesting topic now. Nobody would now argue that there is a human nature. We are living now in a Foucaultian world, and I'm a Foucaultian girl. No, so this argument is now not very interesting at all. Then they are, because furthermore, we can say now that we can intervene biology itself. So even though if you say, look, all these years I've been saying I'm gay because this is a cultural choice, because if I said I was born gay, biologically gay, like animals who are born gay, they would say, oh, you are sick, this is a sickness, a biological sickness, we're gonna. So the militancy had to say it is cultural. We took a phrase from Freud, who said this is a decision, but this he speaks about the unconscious, so it wouldn't be what Freud did mean. But even though it's biological, we can now alter transgenetic the biology. We can, with a 3D impressor, make a liver. We can spread mosquitoes against dengue in Uruguay. What they did? They didn't say, "Hey, mosquitoes, come not here to fuck. You have fuck there. If I find you, I kill you." No. Be quiet. Fuck all you want. We have condoms for you. The mosquitoes were unfertile. So we can also transform and revolutionary biology, not only culture. Darwin itself, if you read it well, speaks a lot of the infinity possibilities of change in nature. Then the other discussion would be about violence. Is there a needed or a justified violence? And they disagree a little, because Chomsky says, well, we have to say with a great responsibility, in name of what justice are we allowing ourselves to be violent. Foucault says we don't need an ideal of justice. It's a war. It's all about power. So at this stage, if I were Chomsky, I would say, well, you're kind of social Darwinian now. You're more biologist than I. And that makes no actual interest neither, because they're arguing, once the proletarian take the power, what shall we do with the bourgeoisie? How shall we punish them? With a hammer? Since there will be no revolution at all, this is like I'm studying what I'm going to do with the money that I win with the lottery without having won it yet. So there is, although a very interesting thing, because Chomsky doesn't believe in the individuals, he believes in the schemes, the structures, the something that is in there in one time, because that's a thing that also produced another misunderstanding, which is Foucault speaks about creativity in a very limited way, a very universal way, the creativity to say what I want to say, the creativity to make a drawing with a dragon having headset, creativity that every child has. And Foucault understands he's speaking about Newton or Leonardo, and he says there's no individual, this idea of romantic genius is a mistake. That was before he visited a great poet who gives him the idea of how history works, no? Raymond Roussel, who made aleatory poems. But that's for another class. So at this stage, there was a kind of defense from Chomsky that the individual has power, and it's not driven by the institutions the biopolitics that force you to do something with your body. No. He says, let's say, and in this point he's against Kant. Let's say I'm driving and I see a person has a gun and will shoot someone. I have a right to cross with a red light. So this is the great violence of Chomsky. The great sacred. So we now could also perhaps, and that's the last thing I will say, there's a great essay from Susan Sontag about a book from Albert Camus. As you know, one historical debate is Sartre versus Camus, and at that time we thought Sartre was right. Now we know Camus was right. Sartre defended Stalin. So it's like when Fidel Castro and Salvador Allende argued, and democracy and without guns was on the side of Allende, who was more daring for us, no? But Fidel Castro was able to keep power, and Allende no. So he says there are two kinds of writers: the husbands and the lovers. In the husband we want decency, moral values. But in Bukowski, in Baudelaire, in the crazy one who takes drugs, we want other flavors, savage. So we can say Chomsky was our husband and Foucault our lover. So I hope you like this, and we see you next time.